Hi, everybody. I am Emily Cook, and I worked with Magnus de Witt this summer on geothermal-to-X potential in Alaska's maritime industry. I'm going to start by kind of going through why this is necessary, and then what exactly is geothermal-to-X, and then kind of go into the more deliverable side of my summer here at ACEP, and then into the so we're all very familiar with climate change, and in the Arctic particularly, this is even more heavily weighted. So the Arctic is warming 3 to 4 times faster than global average. So this comes with a whole host of ecological damaging issues. But within the scope of this study, that mostly focuses on melting sea ice. So with this melting sea ice means that more and more ships will be entering the Arctic, particularly for these Arctic shipping routes, as you can see in red, yellow, and green. So those sea routes, the reason people want to pursue shipping there is because it is much shorter than the alternatives of the Suez and the Panama Canals, which also faces a very choke point scenario. I'm sure you've all heard of the Ever Given scenario a few years ago that caused a lot of economic damage. So with all of these ships coming into the Arctic, we want to plan ahead and figure out if we can fuel these ships sustainably. Now, to kind of summarize the project, Geothermal-to-X is a potential to create these sustainable fuels. So that would be using Alaska's untapped geothermal potential, turning it into a green fuel to make this a sustainable process. Now, Geothermal-to-X comes from power-to-X, which really just means using renewable electricity to create a storable product. So when electricity is difficult to be stored, you can turn it into a fuel that can be transported. So as you can see in this graphic here, geothermal can be used in a lot of different methods to create these products. So you can use both low and high temperature geothermal resources, which makes it a more robust solution. You can use those direct and indirect uses, so the heat itself and the electricity created right in communities, so you can stop it there, or you can continue down to create the end goal of green hydrogen. And now from green hydrogen, you can create other e-fuels such as green ammonia, green methanol, which are compatible with shipping propulsion systems. So now Alaska has lots of untapped potential for this industry. So this starts by having a lot of geothermal potential. And this looks like particularly, say, the Aleutian Arc. There are plenty of volcanoes indicating high temperature resources. This also looks like hot springs, which are found all across Alaska. And untapped potential doesn't just refer to the geothermal resources, it also refers to the geopolitical side of this. So there's a lot of federal interest in Alaska, as I'm sure all of you know. This also looks like energy security, military presence in Alaska. People want to have access to those Indo-Pacific shipping markets, the trade industry being that gateway between North America and those Indo-Pacific markets. So there's a lot of interest within Alaska, not just for geothermal, but also for energy security. And this is also very applicable at the local scale. Being able to combat those high energy burdens using geothermal resources. It's a dual solution. Now you can see from this map those same shipping routes in yellow, red, and green, but also a couple locations that I highlighted in my report. So Adak Island, Unalaska, Nome, St. Augustine, these are all places that I noted have access to the shipping industry, but also to geothermal resources. And this goes more in depth in the study, but they're places to note of potential for this solution. Now, for the deliverable side of my project, I started by doing a literature review. I wanted to get very familiar with the subject. I wanted to, not much resources out there on this in particular in this situation, but pulling from every fringe of the issue because it was very interdisciplinary work. For the bulk of the summer, I was creating a feasibility report, which I was able to complete. And that, like I said, came from a lot of perspectives from the market side, the policy side, engaging stakeholders, kind of looking at it from a lot of directions. And then last week, I was able to go down to Nevada and present my research at the GEOD conference. So that is geothermal energy from oil and gas developing engineering. So kind of a mouthful, but I was able to talk with a lot of professionals in the field exchange ideas and bring that energy back to ACEP. And then with Sid, who was also working on geothermal, we were able to create our T3 lesson, creating an introduction to geothermal lesson for high school students. To conclude, I really do think that Alaska can be a leader in geothermal-to-X technology, and especially for this growing maritime industry, getting ahead of the game to prepare for this influx of traffic. I think that currently there's a lot of bipartisan support for geothermal energy, which cannot be said about many energy resources. So taking that momentum and building off of it while it's here, because policy is always changing. And then to reflect on the summer as a whole, I'm very grateful for my time at ACEP. I feel like I've learned a lot about energy as a whole. My background is in geophysics, so being able to kind of look at the energy world from a more broader perspective with policy and market side, I think it's something that I can take back to my more computational and data focused studies. Thank you. Any questions?
So what were your biggest takeaways from the conference you went to in Nevada, and were there any kind of applications to this project that you found?
Yeah, good question. Like I said, it was a conference that had a lot of different people there. So it was a lot of students. So I met someone that had just graduated from MIT who was using or looking into using geothermal at military bases in particular. And that was something that I came across a little bit that overlap in my study. But I also met a lot of people that came from the oil and gas industry. And then when you look at that from the perspective of Alaska, there's obviously such a huge oil and gas population here. So being able to take that capital within the oil and gas industry and put it towards a renewable energy source, not just the capital, but also the trained workforce, the technology, being able to find that overlap to move towards a cleaner horizon is something I thought was very interesting.
Sites that are being looked at to do this right now?
Not this particularly, but on a DAC island, they are doing power to X or using wind energy. And it's really interesting because it's going to be a completely floating system. So it's just going to be a barge right on the water using the wind energy to create that electricity. And then they're creating green ammonia. So they're taking different things from the air to create everything they need locally. It's using the seawater, purifying it. So it's all a localized system that can be transported and not applicable to any earthquake damage or other geological hazards. There is a push for power to X in general.
I know you traveled around Alaska on your non-working hours. What was like a memorable moment from one of your travels?
One memorable, it's been so great to be here this summer to just go on adventures. I really enjoyed Seward, but probably one of the more unique things was driving up the Dalton Highway and being able to see everything there that you don't really see anywhere else. So yeah, the Brooks Range was beautiful.
We have a question in Anchorage.
Oh, wait.
I think she's come back.
We had a question from the Anchorage audience, if there's still time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hey, this is Bennett in the Anchorage office. I was just curious, there was a chart that showed kind of the different ways of doing geothermal to, power or anything like that. I was curious about one pathway in particular. There was like the direct use for low temperature geothermal to
Yes.
electrolysis. I haven't seen that before. Could you explain that at all?
Yes. So this graph sort of generalizes it, but when in my paper, I go into it a little deeper. It's being able to use, so electrolysis is it takes high temperatures to create. So if you're able to use the heat directly from this process, you can kind of lower that barrier of energy needed to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, essentially.
Okay.
So kind of using the heat that exists in thermal form to lower the barrier to split water. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from abroad?